The smell hit me first. Rotten, pungent, overwhelming. At first, I thought maybe an animal had died nearby. But when I opened my front door, I froze. A mountain of manure, wet, steaming, and piled so high it nearly touched my garage door, sat smack in the middle of my driveway. My stomach twisted as the foul stench wrapped around me. Flies buzzed in lazy circles, already feasting on whatever horrible mixture was in that pile. But it wasn't just the sight of the manure that made my blood boil, it was who was standing next to it. Karen. She stood there with her arms crossed, her lips curling into a smirk. Her platinum blonde bob sat perfectly still despite the breeze, and her eyes, hidden behind those oversized sunglasses, sparkled with pure malice. "What the hell is this, Karen?" I demanded, stepping toward her, my fists clenched tight. She gave a slow, satisfied shrug. "Just a little message, sweetie. Maybe next time you won't block me from doing my job." My jaw tightened so hard I thought my teeth might crack. I knew exactly what she was talking about. The day before, Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, showed up at my door with a clipboard clutched in her manicured hands. She wanted access to my backyard to inspect it for violations. Apparently, my new fence didn't match the exact shade of HOA-approved beige. I told her no. And in Karen's world, no wasn't an option. I took a step closer, the smell of manure burning my nose. "You did this?" She let out a fake little gasp, placing a hand on her chest. "Oh, honey, I didn't do anything. I simply called a friend with a farm. Turns out they had some extra fertilizer. Thought you might need it." I could feel the heat rising in my face. My heart pounded in my ears. She was so proud of herself. Like she had already won. I inhaled slowly through my mouth, trying not to choke on the stench. "You're cleaning this up." Karen laughed, a short, cruel sound that made my blood boil hotter. "Good luck with that," she said, turning on her heel and strutting back toward her house. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before crossing me." I stood there, fists clenched, staring at the disgusting pile blocking my driveway. My car was trapped inside the garage. There was no way I was shoveling this mess myself, and I wasn't about to pay someone hundreds of dollars to clean up something she did. My skin prickled with anger as I watched her disappear into her house. She thought she'd won. But she was wrong. Because one thing Karen didn't know? I don't lose. And I was about to make sure she regretted ever messing with me. I stood there for a long minute, breathing through my mouth to block out the stench. The sun was rising higher, heating the air and making the mountain of manure smell even worse. Flies buzzed louder. My blood boiled hotter. Karen thought she had the upper hand. She wanted to humiliate me, to make me bend. But if she thought I was just going to roll over, she had no idea who she was messing with. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pictures of the mess. Evidence. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I stormed back inside and dialed my best friend Jake. If there was anyone who could help me figure out a way to make Karen regret this, it was him. He picked up on the second ring. "Yo, what's up?" I didn't waste time. Karen dumped a truckload of manure on my driveway. There was a beat of silence before Jake burst out laughing. "No way. She actually did that?" "Yeah," I growled. "And I'm not letting her get away with it." Jake whistled low. "All right, man. What's the plan?" I leaned against the counter, my mind already racing. Karen had spent years terrorizing the neighborhood, petty fines, surprise inspections, and her constant holier-than-thou attitude. Everyone hated her, but nobody ever stood up to her. Until now. "You still have that drone?" I asked. Jake chuckled. "I like where this is going." I smirked. "Meet me in an hour. We're about to give Karen a taste of her own medicine." 1 hour later. Jake pulled up in his beat-up truck, grinning like a kid in a candy store. He stepped out, holding a sleek black drone in one hand and a laptop bag in the other. "All right," he said, "tell me what you're thinking." I filled him in quickly. Step 1. Catch her red-handed. If she wanted to play dirty, I was going to document every shady thing she did. We set up the drone behind a row of hedges in my backyard. The plan was simple: monitor her every move. If she so much as breathed the wrong way, I'd have video proof. As Jake powered up the drone, I noticed Karen outside her house, pruning her rose bushes like nothing had happened. She wore a pastel pink sundress and that same smug smile. I clenched my jaw. She's not going to see this coming. Jake's fingers flew across the drone controls. "All right," he said. "We're live." The drone lifted smoothly into the air, its camera aimed directly at Karen's kingdom. And that's when I saw it. A new violation. One she thought nobody would notice. Her backyard, hidden behind a privacy fence, was a complete mess. Rusty lawn furniture, overgrown weeds, and Was that an illegal fire pit? I grinned. Gotcha. Jake laughed under his breath. Oh man, she's screwed. But this was only the beginning. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I was about to bury her. I leaned closer to the drone feed on Jake's laptop, my heart pounding with excitement. Karen thought she was untouchable, but now I had her. Her backyard looked like a junkyard. Broken patio chairs were stacked in a tangled heap. The grass was knee-high in places, a wild, tangled mess that broke every HOA landscaping rule. But the fire pit, that was the real jackpot. HOA guidelines were crystal clear. No open fires. Karen had fined my neighbor $200 last year for having a portable fire pit that wasn't even lit. And here she was, sitting on a violation 10 times worse. I smirked. Think she'll like getting a taste of her own medicine? Jake chuckled, guiding the drone higher. Dude, she's been begging for it. What's next? I cracked my knuckles. We report her, but not yet. First, we make her sweat. Operation, drive Karen crazy. For the next week, I became Karen's shadow. Every morning, the drone hovered nearby, quietly recording her every move. If she left her house, we documented it. When she went into other people's yards, we caught it on video. And every time she broke her own rules, trash cans left out too long, watering on the wrong day, letting her dog poop without cleaning it up, I saved it. And oh boy, she slipped up a lot. By day 3, I had enough footage to file a mountain of complaints. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted her to feel the pressure first. I started small. The first thing I did was mess with her perfect lawn. Late one night, Jake and I snuck over with a bottle of sugar water. We poured it carefully across her perfectly trimmed grass. By morning, her precious lawn was swarming with ants. The next day, I watched from my porch as Karen marched outside, gasping in horror at the insect invasion. She spent hours spraying, glaring across the street like she suspected everyone. But she had no clue it was me. And that was just the warm-up. Karen loved sending out nasty letters to the whole neighborhood. Fines for overgrown hedges, reminder notices about trash bins, you name it. So, Jake and I decided to give her a taste of her own medicine. I printed an official-looking HOA violation notice, using the same font and letterhead Karen used on everyone else. Dear Miss Karen, you are in violation of HOA Policy 14B, Unapproved Backyard Structures Fire Pit, and Policy 7C, Improper Lawn Maintenance. Failure to correct these violations within 7 days will result in fines of $500. Sincerely, HOA Compliance Office. I smiled as I slid the letter into her mailbox late that night. The next morning, it was chaos. At 8 a.m. sharp, I spotted Karen stomping out of her house, clutching the letter in her perfectly manicured hand. She paced back and forth on her lawn, phone pressed to her ear, probably trying to figure out who dared to fine her. Jake, watching from the drone feed, snickered. She's losing it. And we weren't finished yet. By the end of the week, Karen was unraveling. Her lawn was still an ant-infested mess. She had no idea who sent the fake violation letter. And to top it off, I anonymously filed real complaints against her backyard. Every day, I watched her panic grow, checking her mailbox twice a day, arguing with the HOA's real president, and even digging up her fire pit. And finally, the perfect opportunity arrived. I spotted Karen sneaking around my side yard one afternoon. I stepped outside casually, pretending not to notice her until, Karen, what are you doing? She jumped, nearly dropping her clipboard. I'm conducting a routine inspection, she stammered. I crossed my arms. Funny. You never announced it. HOA rules say you have to give 48 hours notice before an inspection. Her face reddened. Well, you're known for violating our guidelines. I cut her off. Karen, I'm done playing nice. Next time you trespass on my property, I'll call the cops. Got it? Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time, Karen was speechless. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that Karen was already planning her revenge. And it was going to get messy. The day started off normal. Too normal. I was sipping my morning coffee on the porch, enjoying the quiet, when I noticed something strange. Karen's car was missing. For someone who spent every waking moment patrolling the neighborhood, that was weird. Jake's drone had been quiet too. No inspections, no sneaky rule checking. It was like she had vanished. And that made me nervous. When a control freak goes quiet, something's brewing. I should have trusted my gut. Because just as I finished my coffee, I heard it, a loud, clanking rumble from down the street. I leaned forward and nearly choked. A massive dump truck, rusted, dirty, and packed to the brim, was rolling toward my house. I stood up fast, heart pounding. What the? The truck slowed as it reached my driveway. The driver, a scruffy guy in a baseball cap, gave me a lazy wave. And before I could even yell, the back of the truck tilted up. Splat. The first wave of manure hit the ground with a wet, sickening thud. "Hey!" I shouted, running toward the street. "What the hell are you doing?" The driver didn't even blink. "Paid delivery," he said, tipping his cap. "Lady named Karen said you wanted premium fertilizer. No refunds." I barely heard him over the sound of literal tons of manure pouring onto my driveway. The smell hit me next, thick, sour, and unbearable. Flies swarmed the steaming pile, buzzing like they just hit the jackpot. My stomach turned as I stared at the mess. It wasn't just manure. It was wet manure. And standing across the street, watching it all unfold? Karen. Her arms were folded, a triumphant smirk plastered across her face. I stormed over, rage boiling through me. "You did this?" She didn't even flinch. "I warned you," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Next time, maybe you'll learn to respect authority." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "You've crossed the line, Karen. You're cleaning this up." Karen let out a cold laugh. "Oh, honey, that's your problem now. Consider it payback for that little violation letter. Thought I wouldn't figure out it was you?" She knew. Before I could respond, she turned and sauntered back to her house, looking as smug as ever. The truck driver honked once, then rumbled away, leaving me standing there in a cloud of pure humiliation. I should have been furious. And I was. But underneath the anger was something stronger. Determination. If Karen thought I was going to back down, she was in for a rude awakening. I pulled out my phone, snapped dozens of photos of the mess, and smiled to myself. "All right, Karen," I muttered. "You want to play dirty? Let's play." Because this was just the beginning. The manure wasn't just a mess, it was a declaration of war. And if Karen thought she could dump literal crap on my life and walk away, she had another thing coming. But first, I had to handle the disaster in front of me. I spent the next hour shoveling the stink pile into heavy-duty garbage bags. Sweat dripped down my back as the afternoon sun baked the air, and the manure. Every scoop made the smell worse, and no matter how fast I worked, it felt endless. And Karen? She sat on her front porch, sipping lemonade like a queen watching her victory. Every now and then she'd wave just to rub it in. By the time I filled the last bag, I was exhausted, but I wasn't beaten. Not by a long shot. Because while Karen thought I was just cleaning up, I was also planning my revenge. Karen loved one thing more than anything else: her perfect image. She wanted to be seen as the all-powerful HOA queen, always in control. So, naturally, I decided to destroy that image. I called Jake. "You still got that drone footage?" He laughed. "Dude, I've got everything." "What's the plan?" I grinned. "We're going public." Within an hour, we uploaded everything to a private Facebook group called HOA Horror Stories. It had thousands of members, people who hated HOA bullies like Karen. I posted, "Meet Karen, the HOA president who thinks the rules don't apply to her. Illegal fire pits, overgrown weeds, and now she's dumping manure on her neighbor's driveway. What happens when you stand up to a bully? This." I attached photos and drone videos of her messy backyard, the illegal fire pit, and, of course, the giant pile of manure sitting on my driveway. And boy, did it blow up. Within hours, the post had hundreds of comments. People were furious, calling Karen every name in the book. Some even shared their own horror stories about power-hungry HOA presidents. But my favorite part? Someone shared the post in our local community group. By that evening, everyone in the neighborhood had seen it. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted Karen to feel what it was like when someone played dirty. Late that night, Jake and I got to work. Armed with a bag of birdseed, we crept onto Karen's lawn. We spread the seed everywhere: her flower beds, her manicured grass, even her driveway. What? Because by dawn, every pigeon and crow within a 5-mile radius would treat her yard like an all-you-can-eat buffet. And the next morning? It was glorious. I woke up to the sound of Karen shrieking. From my window, I watched as dozens of birds swarmed her yard, tearing up the grass and leaving presents all over her porch. She flailed her arms, trying to shoo them away, but they weren't going anywhere. Not until they finished their feast. Jake texted me, "Mission accomplished." I laughed to myself. This was only the beginning. I wasn't satisfied with small victories, I wanted checkmate. So I did some digging. And what I found? Oh, it was gold. See, Karen had been HOA president for 5 years. In that time, she'd fined almost everyone on the block, but she never actually filed official reports with the HOA board. Which meant her fines were illegal. I gathered every complaint she'd ever written me and sent a formal grievance to the HOA's governing office. I included photos, drone footage, and witness statements from neighbors who'd also had enough. And the best part? I anonymously mailed a copy to every house in the neighborhood. By the next HOA meeting, Karen was toast. When she strutted in, she had no idea what was waiting for her. Half the neighborhood showed up, armed with complaints, photos, and questions she couldn't answer. I sat quietly in the back as the board read through the evidence. With every violation they listed, Karen's face got redder. Finally, the HOA president, her own boss, looked up and said, "Effective immediately, you're removed as HOA president. And we'll be reviewing legal action for misuse of power." Karen gasped. "You can't do this." But they did. And when she stormed out of that meeting, humiliated and powerless, I couldn't help but smile. Because the next day, a new dump truck arrived. And this time, Karen's driveway was the target. I stood on my porch, sipping coffee as the truck unloaded a fresh, steaming mountain of manure onto her perfect brick driveway. And when she stepped outside and screamed in horror, I raised my cup to her and smiled. "Checkmate, Karen." Karen's scream echoed down the street like a fire alarm. She stood frozen on her driveway, mouth open in shock, as the dump truck unloaded a fresh, steaming pile of manure right where her pristine white SUV used to be. The driver, same guy from before, gave a lazy wave as the last clump fell. "Paid delivery," he called out. "No refunds." I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Karen's face turned beet red as the smell hit her full force. "This is war," she shrieked, stomping toward her porch in a rage. I leaned back against my fence, sipping my coffee, enjoying every second. After everything she'd put me through, the fines, the spying, the manure stunt, she had it coming. And the best part? I wasn't even close to done. But first, I wanted to see how long it would take for Karen to break. Karen tried to play it cool at first. That afternoon, she hired a cleaning crew to remove the mess. I watched as 3 poor guys in hazmat suits shoveled manure into bags. They worked for 5 hours, and by the end, Karen's perfectly manicured driveway was stained brown. But that was just the beginning of her problems. See that HOA meeting? It had consequences. The next morning, I spotted a shiny new sign posted on her lawn. "Notice of investigation. HOA board review in progress." I grinned. The HOA wasn't playing around. The board had launched a full audit of Karen's actions, including every fake fine, every under-the-table deal, and every personal stunt she pulled. And let's just say, the skeletons were piling up fast. By the end of the week, Karen's reputation was toast. The Facebook post exposing her hit over 10,000 shares, and the local community group turned into a Karen roast session. People came out of the woodwork with stories. And Mrs. Patel, fined $200 because her flowers were too bright. The Johnsons, threatened with eviction for having a pink flamingo on their lawn. Old Mr. Green, charged $500 for leaving his trash bin out 10 minutes past pickup. Every dirty trick Karen pulled? Exposed. And soon enough, neighbors who once feared her started to fight back. The final straw came on a Monday morning when Karen woke up to find 30 pink flamingos planted across her front yard. Someone even added a neon sign that read, "Free Bird Sanctuary, thanks, Karen." I nearly fell over laughing when I saw it. By now, Karen was unraveling. The once proud queen of the HOA had become a paranoid wreck. She started patrolling the neighborhood, not with her drone but in person. She'd march up and down the street with a clipboard, muttering to herself and taking notes like a lunatic. One day she even tried to catch me breaking a rule. I was watering my lawn when she stormed over. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You think you've won? I will bury you." I smiled, cool as ever. "Funny. I thought you already tried that with manure." Her face twisted with rage. "I'm watching you." "Enjoy the view," I said, turning my hose toward her feet. Water splashed over her sandals and she shrieked in disgust, stomping away. It was official. Karen was losing it. What Karen didn't know was that while she was busy falling apart, I was preparing my final move. I had spent days digging through HOA bylaws and public records, and I found the ultimate trump card. Karen had been fining people left and right, but guess what? She never had proper authority to do so without board approval. Every fine she issued was illegal, and every dollar she collected was embezzlement under HOA law. I drafted a detailed complaint, complete with evidence, and sent it straight to the county HOA compliance office. And within a week, they hit Karen with a legal notice. The charges: the misuse of HOA funds, unauthorized fines, abuse of power, and the punishment? Immediate suspension. The day the notice arrived, I made sure to be outside trimming my hedges. When Karen opened the letter and read the bold words, "Notice of removal," she screamed so loud, a flock of pigeons took off from her roof. Her reign? Over. That evening, the neighborhood gathered for a small celebration on my lawn. Jake brought out his drone for a final victory flyover, and the Johnsons even brought cookies. We toasted to freedom. No more surprise inspections, no more ridiculous fines, and no more Karen. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I leaned back in my chair, finally at peace. And Karen? She was stuck inside her house, curtains drawn, watching helplessly as the neighborhood she once ruled moved on without her. I guess you could say, she dumped on me, but I buried her. For a brief moment, life was perfect. No more Karen spying on my every move. No more surprise fines. No more manure mountains in my driveway. The neighborhood felt lighter, like we had all escaped a dictator's rule. But Karen? Oh, she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I should have known someone as petty as her wouldn't go down without a fight. And her next move? It was the dirtiest yet. It started with a letter. One morning, as I sipped coffee on my porch, the mailman handed me a plain white envelope. No return address, just my name written in perfect, angry handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a typed letter that read, "You think you've won. But I know your secrets. And when I'm done, you'll be the one packing your bags." It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature. This had Karen written all over it. I laughed under my breath. Was this supposed to scare me? After everything I had on her? But by the next day I wasn't laughing. The first complaint hit my inbox at 8 a.m. sharp. "Your lawn exceeds the HOA height limit. Please trim it immediately to avoid penalties." I shook my head. Seriously? My grass was perfectly cut. I had made sure of it after the whole manure fiasco. But by noon I got a second notice. Unapproved exterior changes detected. You are in violation of HOA guidelines. My jaw dropped. Exterior changes? The only thing I had changed was the bird feeder I installed to mess with Karen. And then, a third complaint. Unauthorized noise disturbances have been reported from your residents. Noise disturbances? The loudest thing on my property was my electric toothbrush. I knew what was happening. Karen was behind it, flooding the HOA board with fake complaints, hoping to drown me in paperwork and fines. And the worst part? Even though she had been suspended, she still had friends on the board willing to push her revenge. Fine, Karen. If you wanted a war, I'd give you one. I wasn't going to sit back and let her drag me down. Two could play dirty. So, while Karen flooded me with fake complaints, I went for her weakest spot. Her precious reputation. I contacted every neighbor who had been wronged by Karen. I asked for their stories, every unfair fine, every ridiculous rule. And they were more than happy to share. And together, we wrote the ultimate petition. It was a formal request to the HOA board, demanding that Karen be permanently banned from holding any position of power. We collected 72 signatures, almost the entire neighborhood. And when I delivered the petition to the HOA office, I added a personal note. If you fail to act, we will take this to local media outlets. The next day, I got a call from Mr. Caldwell, the head of the HOA board. His voice was shaky. "We're looking into it," he said. Translation? Karen was in trouble. When Karen found out about the petition, she snapped. And by snapped, I mean she lost what little sanity she had left. One night, at exactly 2:47 a.m., my security cameras caught her sneaking into my yard. I watched the footage the next morning, half laughing, half shocked. She wore a black hoodie, probably thinking it made her invisible, and carried a spray bottle in her hands. And what did she do? She sprayed weed killer all over my garden. My award-winning garden. The next morning, my roses were wilting and my grass had dead patches. A petty little reminder that Karen wasn't done. Jake couldn't believe it. "She's got serious issues," he said, shaking his head. "Yeah," I grinned. "But so do I." And if Karen thought killing my grass was the end, she was about to learn. I had one last move. The final move. While Karen was busy sneaking around like a cartoon villain, I called animal control. What? Because I had a little tip for them. You see, Karen's illegal fire pit wasn't her only HOA violation. She also had 2 unlicensed chickens in her backyard, against every HOA rule. And within 48 hours, animal control paid her a visit. By the time they left, Karen was slapped with fines for illegal poultry and ordered to remove her beloved chickens immediately. And the best part? The HOA board finally gave in. Karen's permanent ban was approved. Effective immediately, she was stripped of all authority and banned from ever joining again. When the notice arrived on her door, Karen's scream was so loud, Jake texted me. Dude, did she just explode? I laughed until my sides hurt. And the next time Karen tried to glare at me from across the street, I simply smiled and waved. Game over, Karen. I had won. For a few peaceful weeks, it seemed like the storm had finally passed. No more surprise finds. No more late-night sabotage. And best of all, no more Karen looming over the neighborhood like a dictator. But if there's one thing I learned, Karen wasn't the type to quit. And when she made her next move, she didn't just cross the line, she destroyed it. It started on a quiet Saturday morning. I was in my garage working on my lawnmower when I heard the rumble of a truck pulling up. At first, I didn't think much of it, until the driver knocked on my door, grinning ear to ear. Delivery for ya, he said, handing me a clipboard. I blinked. I didn't order anything. Well, he chuckled, someone did. I stepped outside and froze. A mountain of manure stood in my driveway. Not a little pile. I'm talking a truckload, fresh, steaming and stinking up the entire block. The driver gave a shrug. Paid in full. Special request to drop it here. Enjoy. And just like that, he drove off, leaving me face to face with Karen's latest masterpiece. From across the street, there she was, Karen, leaning on her porch railing, sipping a glass of iced tea like she didn't have a care in the world. When our eyes met, she smiled sweetly and waved. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, I muttered. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jake. Dude, you need to get over here. Now. 10 minutes later, Jake rolled up on his bike. The second he saw the mess, he nearly fell over laughing. She actually did it, he said between gasps. She dumped manure on your driveway. What is wrong with her? Everything, I groaned. But trust me, she's gonna regret this. I wasn't just mad, I was furious. Karen thought she could humiliate me. She wanted me to snap, to lose my cool. But instead, I was about to serve up the ultimate revenge. I spent the entire day cleaning the mess. 5 hours, 6 trash bags, and 2 showers later, I had finally gotten the smell off my property, but I wasn't stopping there. That night, I hatched a plan so petty, so perfect that even Karen wouldn't see it coming. I dug through old records and pulled out a copy of the HOA bylaws, the same rules Karen had weaponized against me. And oh, did I find a gem. Turns out, excessive noise, including loud machinery, was strictly forbidden after 8 p.m. And wouldn't you know it? Karen's husband loved his garage projects. Every night, like clockwork, he fired up his power tools, and now I had proof. The next day, I submitted an official complaint, in Karen's own words. I am deeply concerned about the repeated noise violations occurring past approved hours. This is a direct violation of community peace. And once the HOA board received it, let's just say, things escalated quickly. Within 48 hours, an official violation notice landed on Karen's doorstep. And oh, it wasn't just for noise. I made sure the board also investigated her illegal fire pit and unapproved lawn structures, because if Karen wanted to play dirty, so could I. I watched from my window as she ripped open the letter, her face turning bright red. She stomped inside, slamming her front door so hard it shook the windows. That's strike one, I whispered. But I wasn't done yet. The next week, I invited every neighbor to a block party. Free food, lawn games, and best of all, a giant outdoor movie night. And what movie did we watch? A montage of Karen's worst moments, edited together from security footage. Her dumping manure. Her sneaking around my yard. Even her screaming fits during HOA meetings. I blurred her face, barely, but everyone knew exactly who it was. By the time the credits rolled, the crowd was roaring with laughter. And Karen? She was watching from behind her curtains, her face twisted in pure rage. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. But then one morning I woke up to find something strange. A for sale sign, right on Karen's lawn. At first I thought it was a prank. But no. Karen was leaving. I couldn't believe it. After years of ruling the neighborhood with an iron fist, the queen herself was abdicating the throne. Jake was the first to text me. Bro, you won. I couldn't help but smile. All the fines, all the stunts, all the pettiness, and now, she was finally gone. As I sipped my coffee on the porch, watching the moving trucks pull away, I couldn't help but think. Sometimes karma takes its sweet time. But when it comes, it's worth the wait. Karen was gone. Finally. Her for sale sign came down, the moving trucks rolled out, and the neighborhood felt peaceful again. For the first time in years, I could mow my lawn without getting a nasty email. I thought I had won. I was wrong. Because Karen? She left a parting gift. And it nearly destroyed everything. It started 2 weeks after she left. I woke up at 2 a.m. to a strange sound, clanking and scraping, coming from the side of my house. At first I thought it was a raccoon digging through the trash. But when I peeked through the window, there was no animal, just an empty yard. I shook my head and went back to bed, figuring it was just my imagination. But the noise? It kept coming night after night. And then, things got weirder. The first package arrived on a Monday. No return address. Just a plain cardboard box sitting on my porch. When I opened it, my stomach turned. Inside was a manure-scented candle, a twisted little reminder of the disaster Karen had left behind. I laughed it off. A prank, right? Someone with a dumb sense of humor. But then the next package came. And the next. For 2 weeks straight, I received a new Karen-inspired gift every day. A garden gnome with a Karen haircut. A fake HOA violation listing my excessive kindness as a problem. And the best one? A custom license plate that read, KR3N4EVR. Someone was messing with me, but who? Karen was gone. Wasn't she? I had to get to the bottom of it. So, I did what any rational person would do. I set up cameras. By the third night I finally caught something. At 3:14 a.m., a black SUV pulled up in front of my house. A hooded figure crept out, dropped a box on my porch and sped off. I rewound the footage a dozen times. It wasn't Karen, but it was someone familiar. And then it hit me. Debbie. Karen's best friend, and her most loyal supporter during all those nasty HOA meetings. I didn't know what her deal was, but if she wanted to keep playing games, I was ready. That weekend I hatched a plan. If Debbie wanted to mess with me, I'd mess right back. I filled a dummy box with the stinkiest rotting garbage I could find, leftover food scraps, spoiled milk, and a little surprise, glitter bombs. Then I left it on my porch and waited. Sure enough, at 3 a.m. her SUV crept up again. I watched from my window as she snatched the box, grinning like she had just won the lottery. I could barely hold back my laughter. The next morning, Jake texted me. Dude, did you see Debbie's car? It's covered in glitter. Victory. I figured the prank war was over, but then came the letter. A fresh HOA violation, this time against me. Your recent use of glitter and waste materials violates community cleanliness standards. Please remove all glitter debris immediately or face fines. I was done playing nice. I marched straight to the HOA office, letter in hand. Explain this, I snapped, tossing the paper on Mr. Caldwell's desk. His eyes widened. I didn't approve this. Of course he didn't. But I had a guess who did. I did a little digging and found out Debbie had been appointed to an unofficial neighborhood watch position by Karen before she moved out. In other words, she still had influence. But I had something better. A little video evidence of her sneaking around my property. I sent the footage to Mr. Caldwell and every HOA board member. The response? Immediate. Debbie was stripped of her watch position. All her complaints were dismissed, and she was given an official warning for trespassing. And me? I sat back and smiled. But just when I thought the drama was over, I got one last package. This one wasn't a prank. No glitter bombs. No manure-scented nonsense. Just a plain envelope with a note inside. In bold letters it read, "You may have won this battle, but the war isn't over. See you soon." No signature. But I didn't need one. Karen was coming back. And when she did, I'd be ready. I should have known Karen wouldn't stay gone forever. For a few months, life in the neighborhood was peaceful. No more surprise finds. No more late-night deliveries. And definitely no more manure in my driveway. But deep down, I knew. Karen wasn't finished with me. And when she came back hard. It was a sunny Saturday morning when I spotted it, a black SUV pulling into the driveway across the street. Jake was the first to text me. Dude, it's her. I didn't need to ask who. I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, and watched as Karen emerged like some villain in a movie, sunglasses, a clipboard, and that same evil smirk. She caught my eye and waved. Miss me? Oh no. I knew without a doubt my life was about to become a nightmare again. By Monday, Karen was back in action. And this time, she wasn't just a regular HOA member. She was vice president. Yeah, let that sink in. The first thing she did? Sent me a warning letter claiming my grass was half an inch too tall. An inch. Jake burst out laughing when I showed him. She's obsessed with you, bro. I wasn't laughing. Because Karen? She wasn't just playing around, she wanted to break me. And her next move proved it. It started small, little things meant to drive me insane. Random inspections of my yard. And mysterious, anonymous complaints about my Christmas lights being too bright. And my personal favorite? A $200 fine for having a garden hose improperly coiled. Every time I fixed one thing, she'd find something else. But the final straw? She tried to have my mailbox removed. According to her, it was not up to community standards. I was done. If Karen wanted a war, she was getting one. I started fighting fire with fire. First, I studied the HOA bylaws, the same rules she loved throwing in my face. And let me tell you, Karen had some skeletons in her closet. Turns out, her fence was 2 inches too high. Her decorative lawn statues were unapproved. And her backyard fire pit? Completely against HOA policy. I filed complaints, anonymous, of course. Within a week, Karen got slapped with 5 violation notices. But I didn't stop there. Karen loved playing dirty, but 2 could play that game. I knew her weak spot, her perfect reputation. So, I launched a little community project. I organized a Neighbor of the Year award, an official event where the community voted for the kindest, most helpful resident. And guess who I nominated? Mrs. Henderson. The sweet old lady Karen had once fined for planting daisies without official approval. The neighborhood loved her. And when she won by a landslide, Karen was furious. I could see it in her face as Mrs. Henderson gave her acceptance speech. Karen's jaw was so tight I thought her teeth might break. But if she was mad then? She absolutely lost it when the HOA president announced that Karen would be in charge of delivering Mrs. Henderson's prize. A year of free lawn care, paid for by the HOA. I caught her glare across the yard. She knew I was behind it. And I thought that would be enough to make her back off. I was wrong. Because the next day, Karen came after me harder than ever. One morning I walked outside and found a certified letter taped to my door. I opened it and my heart dropped. Karen was trying to have me evicted. According to her, I had repeatedly violated community standards and was creating a hostile living environment. She was demanding an emergency HOA hearing, and if the board sided with her, I could lose my home. I called Jake immediately. She's lost her mind. She's scared, he said. You've backed her into a corner. Now she's trying to end this. I wasn't about to let her win. I had one last card to play. I spent the next 2 days gathering evidence, every bogus fine, every false complaint, and all the security footage of Karen's sneaky tricks. But the real jackpot? I found out that Karen had been using HOA funds to pay for her personal landscaping, illegal under HOA bylaws. At the emergency hearing, Karen came in smug, fully expecting to take me down. But when I stood up and calmly laid out my evidence, her smile vanished. I presented everything, emails, surveillance footage, and financial records. When I finished, the room was silent. The HOA president sighed. Mrs. Watkins, this is serious misconduct. Effective immediately, you are removed from the HOA board. And just like that, Karen lost everything. A week later, a moving truck showed up at Karen's house. She wasn't just leaving the HOA, she was leaving the neighborhood. Jake and I sat on my porch, watching as she packed her last box. When she saw me, she didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just scowled and slammed her car door. As she drove away, I raised my coffee cup in a mock salute. Goodbye, Karen, I whispered. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt peaceful. But if there's one thing I've learned, Karen might be gone, but there's always another one waiting. I thought I was free. For a glorious week, the neighborhood felt like heaven. No sneaky fines. No ridiculous violations. No Karen. But just when I thought the nightmare was over, she came back. And this time, she wasn't playing by the rules. It started with a letter. No name. No return address. Just one line typed in bold. You're going to pay for what you did. I laughed it off at first, probably some leftover tantrum from Karen's fan club. But the next morning, my trash cans were missing. Jake shook his head when I told him. Man, she's like a cockroach. You just can't kill her. But the missing trash cans? That was only the beginning. A few days later, I woke up to find my sprinklers running at full blast, at 3 a.m. I hadn't turned them on. Someone had messed with the system. The next day, someone smashed my mailbox. And by the weekend, my car tires were mysteriously low, like someone had been letting the air out. I didn't have proof it was Karen, but come on, who else could it be? I knew she was behind it. And I wasn't about to sit back and let her win. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. I installed hidden cameras around my property, top of the line, night vision, motion triggered. If Karen so much as breathed near my yard, I'd catch her. And sure enough, on the third night, I got the footage. 2:13 a.m. A shadow crept across my driveway. Karen, in a hoodie, sprinkling something on my lawn. I checked the next morning. Weed killer. She was trying to destroy my grass. That was it. If she wanted war, it was war. I took the footage straight to the HOA board. Minus Karen, of course, since they'd already kicked her out. The president was stunned. She's trespassing. This is criminal behavior. And it didn't stop there. When I asked around, I found out Karen had been harassing other neighbors too, leaving nasty notes, messing with mailboxes, and even slashing someone's garden hose. I wasn't the only target. And together, we fought back. We took the evidence to the police. And guess what? Karen wasn't just breaking HOA rules, she was breaking the law. Within days, she got slapped with trespassing charges and a no-contact order. She couldn't come within 500 feet of me or my property. The next time I saw her, she wasn't smirking. She was standing on her porch, watching as the sheriff served her papers. And as much as she tried to fight it, she lost. The best part? A month later, Karen put her house up for sale. Word spread fast. No one wanted to live next to the crazy ex-HOA lady. And when she finally packed up and drove away for good, I stood on my porch and waved. Don't let the door hit you, Karen. And just like that, peace was restored. But you know what? If the next HOA Karen tries something, I'll be ready. Just when I thought I'd buried the Karen nightmare for good, she pulled one last trick. And this one? It was personal. It was a peaceful Sunday morning. I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee, when a massive delivery truck pulled up in front of my house. I wasn't expecting a package, so imagine my surprise when the driver stepped out and asked, "You the guy who ordered 5 tons of manure?" My stomach dropped. I didn't order that. He shrugged, checking his clipboard. Says right here, paid in full. I barely had time to process it before, splat. He dumped the whole load on my driveway. 5 tons of manure, steaming, foul, and piled up like a mountain. Jake showed up minutes later, nearly crying with laughter. Bro, this is next level psycho. I knew exactly who was behind it. Karen. She might have been kicked out of the HOA. She might have lost her power. But she wasn't done with me yet. And I wasn't done with her either. I called the manure company immediately. Who paid for this? The lady on the phone was apologetic but firm. It was an anonymous payment. Prepaid. No refund. Of course it was. But what Karen didn't know, I still had my hidden cameras. And sure enough, when I checked the footage, there she was. 2:45 a.m. But up. Face half covered. But it was her, sneaking onto my porch to leave the delivery slip. I had all the proof I needed. But I wasn't about to call the cops. No. I had a better idea. I called in a few favors, and by Monday morning, the wheels were in motion. Step 1. I rented a commercial-grade fertilizer spreader, the kind you use for massive farms. Step 2. I sent an anonymous tip to Karen's new neighborhood about her illegal landscaping activities. And step 3. I called the same manure company. But this time, I placed a special order. By the time Karen came home that afternoon, her yard was covered, absolutely covered, in the same manure she dumped on me. Front lawn, backyard, flower beds. Everything. Jake nearly passed out laughing. Dude, this is art. And the best part? I made sure to leave a little note on her porch. Hope you enjoy your fertilizer. Love, your favorite neighbor. Karen was furious, but for once she couldn't blame me publicly. What? Because by the time the HOA got my anonymous tip, they discovered that Karen had been violating multiple landscaping ordinances in her new neighborhood. Apparently, her custom garden wasn't just out of compliance, it was illegal. And the best part? The HOA fined her $5,000 to clean it up. 2 weeks later, Karen put her house back on the market. I watched from my porch as she loaded the last of her things into a moving truck. When our eyes met, I gave her a big, wide smile and waved. She didn't wave back. And as she drove away, I leaned over to Jake and said, "You think she learned her lesson?" He grinned. Not a chance. But one thing was clear, Karen was finally gone. And if she ever tried to mess with me again, I'd be ready. For the first time in months, life felt peaceful. No Karen spying through her blinds. No mysterious violations showing up in my mailbox. And best of all, no manure on my driveway. But deep down, I knew it was too quiet. And I was right. Because just when I thought the war was over, Karen had one final move. It started with an envelope. A fancy one, gold-trimmed, like a wedding invitation. I found it stuffed in my mailbox one evening with no return address. The words printed on the front? To my favorite neighbor, let's settle this. I almost threw it away. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was an invitation. Join me at the HOA town hall meeting. 7 p.m. sharp. Let's finally clear the air. Jake snorted when I showed him. Dude, it's a trap. She's up to something. And maybe he was right. But if Karen wanted a public showdown? I wasn't about to back down. Jake snorted when I showed him. Dude, it's a trap. She's up to something. And maybe he was right. But if Karen wanted a public showdown? I wasn't about to back down. When I walked into the town hall that night, the tension was thick. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Neighbors side-eyed me like I was walking into a boxing match. And there, standing at the podium, was Karen. She wore her usual HOA Queen Power suit, a fake smile plastered across her face. But her eyes? Pure venom. "Ah, there he is," she said, voice sugary sweet. "I'm so glad you came." I folded my arms. "What's your game, Karen?" Her smile grew wider. "I'm simply here to present evidence." And that's when she pulled out a folder, a thick one. "I have compiled proof," she said, flipping it open, "that my dear neighbor here has been harassing me for months." The room fell silent. Karen started listing off accusations, one after another. The mysterious manure that ruined her lawn. Prank calls to her new HOA, pretending to be her. Doctored screenshots of fake social media posts where I threatened her. "I simply wanted peace," she said, fake tears glistening in her eyes. "But he won't leave me alone." I felt my fists clench. This was low even for her. Jake, sitting behind me, muttered, "She's good, I'll give her that." But I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I stood up, keeping my voice calm. "Nice story, Karen. But you forgot one thing." Her smile faltered. "And what's that?" I held up a USB drive and grinned. "I've got the truth." I handed the drive to the HOA president. "On this," I said, "is video evidence from my security cameras. Every time Karen trespassed. Every time she vandalized my property. And oh yeah, the footage of her leaving that manure delivery slip." The president plugged it into the laptop. And as the video played, Karen's smile melted. The entire room gasped when they saw her, hood up, sneaking around my yard. The final clip? Karen planting the manure slip on my porch. Game over. When the video ended, the HOA president shook his head in disgust. "Karen," he said coldly, "you are officially banned from holding any HOA position, ever." A ripple of applause swept through the room. "And furthermore," he continued, "we'll be pursuing legal action for harassment and vandalism." Karen's face turned bright red. This is slander." I leaned back, grinning. "You should have quit while you were ahead, Karen." By the time the meeting ended, Karen had lost everything. Her fancy title? Gone. Her reputation? Destroyed. And those legal fees? Let's just say they were enough to make her house sit on the market for months. As I walked out of the meeting, Jake clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Man, I gotta hand it to you," he said. "You didn't just beat her, you buried her." I laughed, feeling the weight finally lift from my shoulders. "Yeah, but if Karen ever tries anything again?" I grinned. "She'll regret it." I thought it was over. I really did. Karen had lost her HOA title. Her dirty tricks were exposed. She was facing legal action for the manure stunt. But people like Karen? They never know when to quit. And this time, she wasn't just coming for me. She was coming for everything. It started small, an anonymous complaint about my lawn being too tall. Annoying? Yes, but harmless. I mowed the grass and moved on. A week later, another complaint. This time about unauthorized landscaping. Apparently, my flower beds were too colorful for HOA standards. Jake laughed it off. "Dude, she's grasping at straws." But I wasn't laughing when a third letter arrived. Violation. Improper use of property, running a business from home. Karen was trying to get me fined for working remotely. I marched to the HOA office the next day. "Who's filing these complaints?" The receptionist gave me a tight smile. "I'm afraid it's anonymous." I leaned in. "We both know who it is." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "You didn't hear this from me, but she's been showing up in person with so-called evidence." I blinked. "What evidence?" "She claims to have a witness who can prove you're violating HOA rules." A witness? That was new. And whoever it was, they were working with Karen. That night I set up extra cameras just in case. And at 2:17 a.m., the motion sensor went off. I pulled up the live feed, and my stomach twisted. It wasn't just Karen sneaking around my property. It was Tom, my old neighbor. The same guy Karen got kicked out of the HOA with her lies. Why was he helping her now? The next morning I paid Tom a visit. He looked surprised when I knocked. Hey. I got straight to the point. Why are you working with Karen? His face flushed. I'm not. I have you on camera, Tom. He sighed, glancing around like someone might be listening. Look, she offered me a deal. A deal? I narrowed my eyes. She promised to clear my violations with her new HOA, if I helped her bury you. My blood boiled. Karen wasn't just fighting me, she was recruiting people to do her dirty work. I took a breath and softened my tone. Tom, she's using you. Just like before. He hesitated. I need those fines cleared, man. I smiled. What if I told you I could help you instead? He raised an eyebrow. How? I pulled out my phone. I have hours of footage of Karen's harassment. If you testify against her at the next HOA hearing, I'll give you everything you need to bury her and get your fines overturned. For a long moment he said nothing. And then he smiled. I'm in. With Tom on my side, the plan was simple. 1. Let Karen think she's winning. 2. Gather even more evidence. 3. Expose her publicly, one last time. A week later, Karen filed 2 more fake complaints, both backed by Tom's witness statement. But what she didn't know. Every time they met, Tom was recording everything. And the things she said? Let's just say, they sealed her fate. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, the room was packed. Karen was there, smiling like she'd already won. And when the president called us forward, she wasted no time. This man, she said, pointing at me, has repeatedly violated HOA policy. And thanks to my witness, she gestured toward Tom. I have proof. I stood calmly. I also have evidence. I handed a new USB to the president. Karen's smile faded when the first video played. Her voice, clear as day, bragging about setting me up. Tom, just say you saw him running a business. These idiots will believe anything. When the last video ended, you could have heard a pin drop. The HOA president glared at her. Karen, you've crossed every line imaginable. This is fake, she stammered. Tom stood up. No, it's real. And I'm done helping you. She turned bright red. You traitor. The president banged his gavel. Enough. Karen, you are hereby fined $10,000 for harassment, falsifying reports, and property violations. Her mouth fell open. You can't. And if you refuse to pay, he added, we will pursue criminal charges. Karen's face crumpled. For the first time ever, she looked defeated. After the meeting, Karen stormed out, probably straight to her lawyer. But the damage was done. The HOA cleared all my violations, apologized publicly, and even sent me a thank you card for exposing her. And Tom? His fines were wiped clean. Jake clapped me on the back as we walked home. I gotta say, man, you didn't just win. You destroyed her. I laughed. She messed with the wrong neighbor. And as we stepped onto my perfectly manicured lawn, one thing was crystal clear. Karen was finished. For a few weeks after the HOA hearing, the neighborhood felt different. No more petty violations. No more fake complaints. And best of all, no more Karen. It was like a dark cloud had finally lifted. But as much as I wanted to believe it was over, I knew people like Karen didn't go down without a fight. And her final move? It was her most desperate one yet. It happened one Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee on my porch when Jake jogged over, wide-eyed. Dude, you gotta see this. I followed him down the street, and there it was. A big, bright for sale sign planted in Karen's perfectly trimmed front yard. She's leaving? I asked, half in shock. Jake grinned. Guess she finally realized the whole neighborhood hates her. I wanted to celebrate, but a nagging feeling gnawed at me. Karen wouldn't just walk away without stirring up more trouble. And boy, I was right. A few days later, a moving truck pulled up. But Karen wasn't quietly packing her things. Nope, she turned her exit into a public spectacle. She held a massive garage sale with a big homemade sign that read, "Everything must go, even my dignity." Jake whistled when he saw it. Man, she's really losing it. But the real kicker? She made sure everyone knew why she was leaving. Every time someone asked, she'd huff and say, I was forced to move, thanks to my lying, cheating neighbor. And the worst part? Some people believed her. The night before she officially moved out, I heard a strange noise outside. I grabbed a flashlight and crept to the window. And there, under the cover of darkness, Karen was back. But this time she wasn't alone. Her teenage nephew, a kid with a devilish smirk, was helping her. And what were they doing? Tearing up my front lawn. They had bags of salt, pouring it directly onto the grass. I knew exactly what they were doing. Salting the earth so nothing could grow. "Oh, you want to play dirty, Karen?" I muttered. "Fine. Let's play." I didn't stop her. I didn't even confront her. Instead, I recorded everything and I called the cops. By the time the officers arrived, Karen was caught red-handed, still dumping salt. Her face paled when she saw me standing on my porch, phone in hand. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, you're literally holding a bag of salt." And just like that, Karen was slapped with a vandalism charge. A perfect ending, right? Not quite. The day Karen officially moved out, I made one last move. I bought her house. Yep, you heard that right. With all the legal fines and the public humiliation, Karen had to sell at a huge loss. So I snagged the property for dirt cheap. And to make things even sweeter, I turned it into a community garden, a place where neighbors could plant flowers, share vegetables, and heal from the reign of HOA terror. Jake laughed when he saw the "Welcome to Karen's Garden" sign I hung out front. "You're never gonna let her live that down, huh?" I grinned. Not a chance. With Karen gone, the neighborhood finally returned to normal. The HOA even voted to change the rules, limiting how much power any one person could hold. No more power-hungry Karens. Ever again. And as I sat on my porch watching kids play and flowers bloom in the garden once owned by my worst enemy, I couldn't help but smile. Because no matter how many tricks she pulled, I won. And if Karen ever tried to come back, I'd be waiting.